I grew up with that house in my bones. The worn banister I learned to slide down at 7. The kitchen sink with the single chipped mug that was always Grandma Evelyn's no matter who else used it. The backyard pear tree that decided the date of every summer party. For years, my life split into 2 rhythms. The city job that paid the bills, and Sundays at Evelyn's, where I stocked her refrigerator, chased her pills into the right bottle, and argued with her about why she couldn't eat the entire pan of meringues. After she slowed down, the visiting schedule tightened until I was the one with a spare key and the Sunday casserole habit. That's the short version of who I am and what was at stake. That house was where her stories lived, and if anyone could keep it from becoming someone else's beige funeral, it was me. The reading was at her kitchen table, the one with a ring from a coffee mug forever stamped into the wood. Family drifted in, aunts with perfume like tiny war flags, cousins who smiled too broadly, nephews who pretended the tray of cookies was a chessboard. The lawyer unrolled a yellow envelope like a magician pulling a rabbit, then did what lawyers do with that particular kind of neutral, paper-cut voice. Names. Small clauses. A bequest here. A charity there. The room held itself in the way a crowd does before a joke lands. You could feel people rehearsing the sound they meant to make. Then the line about house landed not as a sentence, but like someone switching on light in a dark room. The property at 14 Willow Lane is bequeathed to Claire Thompson. The air changed. Marcus, my cousin who used to break the backboard with his head at Thanksgiving, let out a low whistle and said, half laughing, "Well, that figures. You've been living there more than she has." Sophie came over and hugged my shoulder with the blunt compassion of someone who'd seen me ferry groceries at midnight. "You always did," she murmured. A few heads nodded, quiet validation from people who'd seen the late-night calls, the prescriptions sorted, the walks to the pharmacy. Aunt Linda, though, didn't move. She sat like a photograph that someone forgot to take down. Where everyone else's features rearranged into smiles or polite surprise, hers narrowed as if the word house had slipped past a guard and tripped an alarm. Her lips went thin, then pressed together. She didn't stand to congratulate me, didn't reach for my hand. When the lawyer closed his folder and the murmur of condolences began to swell, she folded her hands so tightly her knuckles were white and looked at Evelyn's portrait above the mantel as if it might offer an explanation. I could feel the room tilt toward me and away from her at the same time, and that tilt told me everything I needed to know about what would come next. I slept like a cardboard box, not from grief exactly, but from the weight of making lists in my head. Paperwork, funeral details, which of Grandma Evelyn's teacups actually had chips, and which ones were just pretending. I wasn't expecting Aunt Linda the next morning. I wasn't expecting her to already be at the front step, knocking with the kind of briskness people use when they mean business and entitlement at the same time. She was wearing her Sunday face. Carefully neutral, eyebrows smoothed, the same one she'd used at every family function when someone else was being congratulated. Her purse was perched on her wrist like a statement. She paused on the porch as if memorizing the paint, then turned to me and said, "I thought I'd get an early look. You wouldn't mind, would you?" The "would you mind" was a test. I knew that look. I stepped aside. Inside, she started like someone walking through a house she'd been rehearsing in her head for years. "This was my room for a while," she said, running a finger over the mantel where Evelyn kept framed photos. "Remember the wallpaper?" She'd always loved to compare memories as if they were trophies. At first, I tried to point out small things. The cushion Dad gave her, the mug with the chip. But she kept talking over me, layering memory upon memory, like a person painting over a picture until the original was gone. "You used to hide under that table when you were a kid," she said, tapping the table where I had in fact once hidden from a thunderstorm. "I remember when we moved that bookshelf. Claire, don't tell me you think you're the only one who remembers this place." It wasn't curiosity, it was claim staking. She walked through each room cataloging her past as if memory were currency, and spending it would rewrite the ledger. When I tried to explain the Sunday routine, that I'd been bringing fresh fruit because Evelyn's teeth made her avoid certain things, that I'd learned to read her pill bottles after one terrifying night of mixed-up doses, she tightened. "Grandma was getting forgetful," Linda said, voice low and practiced. "We all are, but that's not the same as being taken advantage of." She let the last words hang. They were designed to sting. "You think I manipulated her?" I asked. My voice was steadier than my hands. I pictured the spare key in my pocket like proof. Ordinary, heavy, human. "Do you know when this was decided? Do you know how long she'd been talking about keeping the house in the family?" I didn't have the will in my hands. That would come later. For now, I had memories, receipts for groceries, photos of me fixing the leaky sink at midnight. The evidence of care felt flimsy when someone wielded accusation like a scalpel. Linda's mouth thinned. "She was my mother's sister," she said, as if kinship could be translated directly into entitlement. "She should have told me. I should have been consulted." She bit the last word off like it could be swallowed whole and replaced with outrage. Then she did the thing I'd half expected, but still felt like a cold hand around my throat. She pulled out her phone. "I already called a lawyer," she said, the words casual as weather. "Just to double check. You know how these things are. You'll have to understand if I want to see the paperwork." The implication was clear and ugly. Suspicion packaged as due diligence. I watched her dial with the same quiet disbelief I might watch someone light a match in a dry forest. Part of me wanted to slap the phone out of her hand and tell her to leave, but the rest of me was tired of fighting performative grief. So I said nothing, and she filled the silence with more memories and accusations. Insinuations about visits, about who had been with Evelyn in her worst hours, about what had been said behind closed doors. She left a scattering of small, sharp sentences in her wake. "You always were good at getting people to like you." She was confused, Claire. "We'll see if this stands up." And shut the door with the kind of soft click that announces the end of a scene and promises there will be more. I stood in the kitchen, hand on the ring-stained table, feeling like I was both inside and watching someone else's play. The house seemed to inhale. If Linda thought her performance would make me crumble, she was misreading the script. If she thought her lawyer's voice would be a trump card, she hadn't yet met the document that sat in a bank safe and the people who'd heard Evelyn say the same thing for years. She wanted the house lived in, not hollowed out. Still, anger isn't the same as action, and I felt both, hot and useless, as I walked the rooms she'd walked and waited for the next act. The lawyer arrived just after noon, a man in a sensible suit with a folder that looked like it had seen fewer family dramas and more city council meetings. He introduced himself as Mr. Hargrove and smiled the practiced smile of someone who'd learned long ago to be the quiet center of loud rooms. He set the folder on the kitchen table and politely asked if anyone minded if he read the pertinent pages aloud. Linda bristled like a trimmed hedge. "I already told you I called," she began, but Mr. Hargrove raised a hand and began to read. He flipped to the amendment first, the one Linda's lawyer would later try to make a spectacle of, a small, recent change about a wooden box of toys to be given to the youngest grandchild. "This amendment solely concerns a toy box," he said, his voice even. "It does not alter the disposition of the property." Then he turned 2 pages further back, slower this time, as if making space for whatever needed to be heard. He read the clause about 14 Willow Lane, and when he finished, I felt something like a wind come through the room. The will, he explained, had been updated 15 years earlier to reflect my grandmother's wishes about the house. He read Evelyn's own line, the one she'd said out loud so many times to anyone who'd listen. "The house is to be kept within the family and entrusted to Claire Thompson, as she is the one who will keep it alive." Linda's face went from sharpness to a slow deflation. Her accusation of senility and manipulation collided with those 4 simple words and fell apart. The room that had held a dozen possible futures for the house narrowed, until only the one my grandmother had chosen remained. No forensics, no last-minute coercion claims, no dramatic courtroom showdown, just paper, signatures, and a decades-old declaration of trust. For a moment, no one spoke. Then I found I could breathe again. Not because some stranger had declared me the winner, but because the truth, mundane, legal, utterly human, was finally audible. I folded my hands on the table the way Evelyn used to when she wanted to steady herself. "She told me she wanted it lived in," I said quietly. "Not emptied for profit, not turned into something that smells like no one ever loved it." I could have used the victory as a weapon. I could have lit into Linda about the phone call or the insinuations, paraded receipts and receipts of presents as if my care were a trophy cabinet. Instead, I stepped toward her and held out an olive branch the only way I knew how. With words, not with knives. "You always have a place here," I said. "The door's open. Come by whenever you want." She left without taking it. She closed the car door with a sound that was less final than I expected. More like someone putting down a book they aren't ready to finish. The yard seemed louder after she went, the pear tree creaking as if to remind me that seasons keep their own counsel. If revenge needs a dramatic crescendo, this one would be disappointing. My triumph looked like ordinary mercy, continuing to show up, keeping the house warm with soup and holiday chaos, refusing to feed someone else's bitterness with my attention. In the end, Evelyn's trust did the work for me. The law was only the frame that held her words. I made a cup of tea, sat at the ring-stained table, and for the first time since the reading, let myself believe that keeping a house alive could be a kind of quiet justice. The house would have its holidays again, its mismatched cups and chipped mugs, the sound of my laugh echoing in rooms that had always known me. That, I thought, was enough.